don't have enough energy. What do I do? How do you keep up with all the energy? How do you maintain your energy? It comes up every day pretty much. And I think it is the main reason why people eventually seek out a different lifestyle, eventually seek out a different way to eat, is they just run out of energy. And this gentleman's going to be teaching us a lot about energy with his energy blueprint. So with no further ado, welcome, Ari. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, David.
This is Ari Whitten. He's the creator of the Energy Blueprint, and his goal is to, I think you've got a goal to at least affect the lives of 1 million people in the next 5 years with renewed energy.
That's
And you've got quite a project going on with your Energy Blueprint, and you're actually doing. We're going to get into this because you're doing a free training actually, and it started. Geez, it starts today. Did it start today?
Today is literally today. Yeah, April 4th through the 15th is when it's going on.
Okay, so we'll put links above or below. Check that out, everybody, and check out what Ari's up to. And this guy he's really a health phenom and a kind of a guru, if you will, in that I really like his approach because he's not kind of bought into any one diet. He's not cherry picking research. He really has an overall strategy and discusses the things that don't move very much. Right? Food can change a lot. Depends on where you are. What's your latitude? What's your attitude? And things like sunlight, well, that's a more appropriate energy for healing. And that's something we can all agree on. It doesn't move very much. The sun's always there every day. So
Yeah.
anyway, let's get into a little bit of that, because one thing I'm picking up about you is that you are into light therapy and you've done some extensive research in that area. I just love to pick your brain on that one. Let's go there first.
Yeah, absolutely. So light is something I'm super passionate about. And I think it's a fascinating topic because there's this really big gap between what the science says about how light affects our body and how important it is and all the layers of that story and the public knowledge around sunlight. And really, I'd say most people in the modern world have no clue about the relevance of light to their health. And if people have any idea about it, it's just, oh, sunlight's good for vitamin D. So I take my vitamin D pill and that takes care of my vitamin D. So I don't need the sunlight for anything. Well, there's a lot more layers to this story that benefits that you're getting from sun exposure and from other kinds of light that you cannot get with a vitamin D pill. So I'm trying to think where's the best place to start
I think red light is very interesting to me, and you're an expert in that area from what I've been listening to. Let's get into that. The red side of the spectrum. Tell us a little bit about what you're learning and what you've learned.
Okay. Well, so last year I wrote a book on that topic called The Ultimate Guide to Red Light Therapy. Other than medical textbooks, meant for scientists and clinicians, this is pretty much the book on that subject, that's accessible to the average person.
What's the book called?
It's called The Ultimate Guide to Red Light Therapy. You can find it on Amazon.
Okay, cool. The Ultimate Guide to Red Light Therapy. And you can see how Ari's name is spelt up. We got him up on the bottom third there. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So let me just give a broad context to understand this. So the electromagnetic spectrum, let's say it starts, and if people want to Google, an image search for the electromagnetic spectrum, just so they can get a visual for what I'm about to explain. On one end of the spectrum, we have, things like X-rays and gamma rays, all these invisible sort of cosmic rays. These are very, very small wavelengths. And then you get into bigger and bigger wavelengths. And then you get into the visible light spectrum, which starts down at UV light, ultraviolet light. Then you get into in blue and indigo and violet sort of range. And then we get into green, yellow, orange, red. That's the part of that electromagnetic spectrum that humans can see with our eyes. And then as you get out of the red spectrum, you get into something called near infrared and then far infrared. And then beyond that are things like microwaves and radio waves. So that's the full electromagnetic spectrum. Now within that visible part of the spectrum, the colors of the rainbow. So Roy G. Biv, as we all learned in grade school, and then the UV part, which is partly invisible, and then on the other side, near infrared and far infrared. There are about 5, arguably maybe 6 different bioactive wavelengths of light. In other words, wavelengths of light or electromagnetic rays that are affecting human physiology. So within that, I'll mention one. Blue light goes into our eyeballs, feeds back into our brain in a part of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's where our circadian clock is. And that regulates all sorts of different neurotransmitters and hormones. It regulates our circadian rhythm, which controls our sleep-wake cycles, which controls the depth of our sleep, how awake we are, our energy and our brain performance and our mood the next day. So that's a whole topic unto itself. We could talk just about that one thing for 5 hours. Now, there's several other layers to the story. People know about UV light and vitamin D. We'll leave that one aside. There's more complexities there too, but for now we'll leave that. Red and near infrared light are a really fascinating subject. And this is something few people know about. It's starting to become more known now, but there's over 5,000 studies on the topic of red and near infrared light and how it benefits all kinds of different issues and has various health benefits, from everything from fat loss to skin anti-aging to muscle gain and strength gain to enhancing the adaptations that you get, like amplifying the benefits you get from exercise, to helping to prevent neurological disease, to combat anxiety and depression, and a range of other benefits, enhancing tendon healing and wound healing. And, it's used in all kinds of different medical applications. Well, for many, many years, this was only used in the context of lasers, and really high priced lasers. So it was like, $15,000, $25,000, $40,000 lasers that you would get this kind of therapy in the context of some medical clinic or a physical therapist's office or a doctor's office of some kind. And that's the reason that it's existed for several decades, but hasn't really gone mainstream. It's because most people can't afford $20,000 for a home unit. Well, the big breakthrough in the last 5 years or so is that we've discovered, and there's science to support this, that just LEDs, like LED light panels, that are at the appropriate wavelengths in the red and near infrared regions, can have basically all of the same effects as the $20,000, $40,000 lasers. And you can do it for a few $100 instead of $20,000 or $30,000. So what are they doing in our bodies? Well, there's a number of physiological mechanisms. I love geeking out on the mechanisms. We can get into that. But the basic gist of it is that they're stimulating our mitochondria to produce more energy. That's one of the layers of how they work. And then the other one is enhancing all kinds of signaling molecules that are tissue specific. So for example, if you shine it on your muscles, it enhances signaling molecules that amplify muscle growth or the adaptations to exercise, like improving strength and endurance and things like that. If you shine it on fat cells, it helps trigger signaling molecules that help release the fat from the cells and help your body burn fat. If you shine it on your skin, it helps stimulate collagen production. So it creates that anti-aging, anti-wrinkle effect. Shine it on the brain, you get increased brain-derived neurotrophic factor and help stimulate brain cell growth, decrease neuroinflammation, and so on. So there's a lot of different mechanisms that are very tissue dependent, but the basic gist of it is that it's bolstering mitochondrial energy production. These are the energy generators in our cells. And the more you do that, whether it's your muscles or your brain or your heart or your skin or wherever it is, the more you boost mitochondria, the more energy those cells produce, the more those cells and that organ, the brain, the heart, the muscles, the skin, the more it works better and is healthier.
Let's back it up for a second. I just want to simplify this for everyone listening. You're talking about red spectrum diodes, basically LEDs, and you can buy them. I mean, I have a couple of them that are like they're like this. They're kind of in a box with a bunch of little LEDs on them. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yes, exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay, and I think a friend of mine got those like 10 years ago for like growing plants. We were starting plants, at my place in Canada in like February, and it's just, snow on the ground outside. So you can't even use the greenhouse at that time of the year. And so we're using those to start these plants off. So I just want to clarify that. Also, when we think about everybody out there in the world, we got people tuning in from all over the world. What about sunlight in this regard? Because sunlight certainly contains red spectrum. Or what about towards the end of the day when the sun gets kind of more into that golden hour? Does it have a different quality and a different healing effect because of the different spectrum at that time of the day?
Yeah, good questions. I want to comment on the plant growing thing first, because there's just an interesting little story. Before all these companies that have emerged in the last few years selling red light therapy devices with these LED lights, before they emerged, I reached out to a plant growing light company and asked them if they could start making me custom lights by switching out the LED bulbs, which were multi-chromatic. They were multicolor lights from UV and blue and green and all kinds of different colors. I said, can you make only LEDs in the 660 nanometer and 850 nanometer range? And so I've been having, that was actually the first LED devices that were being created, were things that were being created from a plant growing light manufacturer company. And I was having these custom red light therapy devices created. They had no idea, I'm sure, why I was ordering these lights at this weird frequency, but that was kind of how it all started. So it's funny to hear that you have a similar story with that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So sunlight, yes, part of the sun spectrum is red and near infrared light. So we do get some of those same benefits from sun exposure. There's a couple key differences. So one, and this is kind of intuitive and counterintuitive at the same time. You talked about as the sun goes down, it shifts more to a reddish spectrum. That's true. However, when the sun is in the middle of the day, when it's up high and it's less red in color as far as what we're detecting, the truth is there's actually more overall light intensity coming at us at those times of day. It's just that there's also a lot more blue light within there as well. So we don't see it as red, but the truth is that there's lots of red and near infrared there. So if you want to get the benefits, midday is probably a better time to do it. At least you're getting more light at that time. So yes, you can do it. The way that if you actually do the math on it, and I've seen calculations done where you can sort of say, here's the overall light intensity, and this particular portion of the overall sun's light output is in the red and near infrared spectrum. And you can actually calculate what's called power density, which is a sort of measurement of, it's in milliwatts per centimeter squared. So it's basically a measurement of how much overall light intensity over a particular surface area. And the equivalent of, let's say, what you would get from 5 minutes in front of one of these high power LED lights that's specifically in the red and near infrared spectrum, it works out to be something like an hour in the sun is the equivalent of that.
So now, 5 minutes to an hour. So 5 minutes with your LEDs versus an hour in the sun. Plus, it's more targeted. So, for example, let's say you're indoors, it's nighttime. You don't want to be hit with all that blue light. That it makes more sense for that type of use. By the way, just real quickly, I'm here with Ari Whitten. This guy is really an incredible asset to all of us in getting our energy back up. And I think the message that you're putting out there, I haven't gotten into the energy blueprint yet, but it's starting today. We put the information to join Ari's energy blueprint free training for the next 9 days. Or no, it's longer, 11 days.
11 days, yeah.
Yeah, we put that in the links down here. So please click into that and join us for those 11 days. I think it's going to be a lot. What you're doing is circadian rhythm. It's light therapy. Don't do anything too crazy with food. Eat sensibly. Don't get too off on one side or the other. And then that is really a good. I want to hear it all, but I'm guessing that's probably your overall strategy for getting people's energy up, which is use all these other tools that we have other than food to help us get our energy up. This one's interesting. So with red light therapy, would that in fact give us an effect of feeling charged up? Is it a calming light? Is it because when I think of red, I think it's invigorating. That's something where it's like a red energy. It's fiery. What's the effect on that side?
Yeah, interesting question. And the truth is actually that people have different effects. There's some variation there. What you're talking about as far as like the energetic qualities of red being fiery, some of that is sort of how colors affect us in terms of mood. And that's that's a whole kind of separate area of study. And that's not really within my realm of expertise. I haven't looked at that extensively as far as how does blue or red or green kind of affect us in terms of our mood. But this is actually a very direct physiological effect. This light is actually penetrating into your body and affecting your cells. Now, I'll show you something interesting. I happen to have one of my little flashlights out.
Okay, cool. Let's see what you've got here. Okay.
It's a lot easier to see this in a dark room, but when you took a flashlight when you were a little kid, a lot of kids took a flashlight and they might have like tried to shine it through their fingers, right? So what's interesting, this happens to be a red light, but if you take a regular light, regular flashlight, that's white light, and you shine it through your finger, what you can see is that only the red wavelengths penetrate through. All the other wavelengths of light actually get stopped at the very surface, either at the very surface of the skin of the epidermis or just very close to the surface. Red light can penetrate, as you can see here, it's penetrating all the way through my finger. So the powerful red light can penetrate inches into your body. And when it does that, it's literally penetrating inside of your cells and it's affecting your mitochondria. It's reacting with a part of the mitochondria, the cellular energy generators, called cytochrome C oxidase. And in the process, those photons of light are then stimulating those mitochondria to produce more energy. So it's this very physical reaction, chemical reaction that's occurring inside of our cells. Now, a couple layers to that story of whether it's energizing or calming or something like that. Part of it, so the nuances here are individual responses and the health of the person. And then the second part is the time of day that you use it. So if you use it closer to bed at night, it can actually be calming and support sleep. And there's actually research showing that it can support more melatonin production. So that's one aspect of things. If you use it earlier in the day, it can be more energizing. The only caveat to that is part of the way that this works is through a process called hormesis, which is basically a transient burst of metabolic stress, basically of reactive oxygen species or free radicals inside of your cells. So it creates this burst of free radicals. Most people think those free radicals are bad. However, exercise also does the same exact thing. Okay, exercise is also a hormetic stressor that creates a temporary boost of free radicals.
That was an interesting word that you used, hormesis.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that word.
Yeah. So, well, actually, I don't know, in terms of the origins of the word, I actually don't know, but I can tell you what the meaning of it is, which is it's basically a transient stressor that stimulates your body to make adaptations that make it stronger and more resilient to stress. So exercise creates a transient burst of free radicals or oxidants. It stresses out your cells very temporarily. And in response to that, the cells initiate this cascade of different reactions that basically make it stronger. So to give you a couple examples, one is at the mitochondrial level, there's something called the NRF2 pathway, which builds up your internal antioxidant defense system. So instead of just taking, vitamin C and vitamin E pills and saying, I need to get my antioxidants, this is actually building up your cell's internal antioxidant defense system, which is hundreds of times more powerful than, antioxidant supplements that you might take.
Okay, so, wait, hold on right there. That was an interesting thing you just said.
Yeah.
You're saying that the light therapy itself builds up the cellular defenses within each cell that basically protect the cell from free radical species. Is that
exactly?
Okay.
Exactly. So think of Nietzsche's statement, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's the basic idea of hormesis. So the reason that there is a body of thousands of studies showing that exercise prevents not only things like cardiovascular disease, not only benefits your muscles, but also benefits your brain and protects against depression and protects against neurological diseases and all dozens of different kinds of diseases, cancers and diabetes and insulin resistance and all kinds of different diseases. The reason why is that you're using a temporary stressor to make your cells stronger in response to a broad range of different potential stressors, not just exercise, but your cells actually become more resilient to all sources of stressors. So whether that's psychological stress, whether it's toxins in the environment, a poor diet, or anything else, you're building up resilience at the cellular level. So exercise is a type of hormesis, fasting is a type of hormesis, many phytochemicals, which you're very, very into. There's a whole field of study called xenohormesis, spelled with an X. And a lot of phytochemicals are xenohormetins. They are, even though many people commonly think of them as antioxidants, many of them actually function as pro-oxidants initially. And then, like exercise and like these other types of hormetic stress, they react with our cells in a way that stimulate the internal antioxidant defense system to be built up. So it's a temporary pro-oxidant that creates a net antioxidant effect.
Okay, well, let me hold you up right there.
Yeah.
For everyone joining us right now, I'm David Avocado Wolfe. We're joined by Ari Whitten. This guy is really an expert in so many different areas of health, and he's doing a whole training that's actually beginning today. It's going to go on for 11 days, free training. We put the link below, somewhere down here, up there. Check it out, and you can join that free training. And he's going to teach us all kinds of strategies to increase our energy. Again, number one complaint that I hear, Ari, is I don't have enough energy. I'm running out of energy. And then we seek for stimulants, right? And so I do want to talk to you about stimulants and the danger thereof.
Yeah.
And what we can do to build our energy is we're going to cover it on this call, everybody, but we're going to, obviously go into much greater depth in the training, which begins today. So if you're just joining us right now, Ari Whitten is joining me right there. You can see him. And I'm David Avocado Wolfe, and we are having the best day ever. Okay, go ahead and continue.
Yeah. So remind me where I was now.
Okay, so we were talking about the power of red light,
yes,
and as a basically a pro-oxidant that turns into an antioxidant effect, protects the cells. And I'd love to get into what I really want to know is, are there specific frequencies of red light and infrared that are of particular value?
Yeah. So let me wrap up this thought on hormesis, the hormesis aspect of things. So you initially asked, is it energizing or sedating? I went into all of that explanation of the mechanisms, basically to say that some people who are more unhealthy, for example, people with chronic fatigue syndrome, have a very low tolerance to oxidative stress at the cellular level. So for example, you take somebody with chronic fatigue syndrome and say, go do this hour-long workout at the gym. They'll be wiped out for days from that. I mean, bedridden and totally exhausted because their cells have lost their resilience. They can't handle the burst of that oxidative stress.
I've been in workouts where I was out of it for days.
Yeah. So that's the thing that's interesting is even, and I call this concept the resilience threshold. And it's basically at the cellular level, everybody has some capacity to tolerate stressors while maintaining balance and homeostasis. And everybody also has some threshold at which you can exceed that. And once you exceed that resilience threshold at the cellular level, you've exceeded your cell's capacity to cope with that degree of stress. Now you start to get symptoms. And one of the key symptoms is fatigue. So even a healthy person such as yourself could do some amount of extreme exercise that's going to wipe you out. You could also get some amount of mercury poisoning or lead poisoning that's going to wipe you out. The key difference is that some people have a very high resilience threshold at the cellular level. Their mitochondria are very strong. Other people have a very low one, and they're very fragile. They're very sensitive. Every type of even a very mild little stressor can leave them exhausted. So with red light, what you're getting is some people, the people who are more unhealthy, are going to be more reactive to it because part of the mechanism of how it works is that temporary burst of reactive oxygen species. So people with chronic fatigue syndrome, for example, or other severe medical conditions can maybe in some cases only tolerate a very small amount of it. And then they have to start there and slowly build up over time. So for those people, if they do too much, it can leave them tired just the same way that exercise can. But if you get the dose right and you're, which differs depending on whether you are healthy and robust or whether you're more not so healthy. If you get the dose right, it should create an energizing effect.
Okay, so this is really fascinating. For everyone joining us right now, we've got Ari Whitten and his energy blueprint, which he goes in depth in many areas. I was just particularly interested in light therapies, and we've only just so far gotten into just red light. I've got these on, Ari, because of the blue light of this fluorescent light up here, and I got the softest one I could get. Still is loaded with blue light. Yeah. Tell us about that side of it and the dangers of ionizing radiation, like aggressive blue light at night, and the problems that causes. Because I'm hearing that we can get light frequencies that heal us, but there's light frequencies that can hurt us as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, it's funny. I just encountered actually a study that was talked about in an article in the New York Times from about like 1993, and it was one of the first articles where this new science of circadian rhythm was kind of being discovered. And one of the quotes from the researchers was, I'm not going to get this exactly right, but it's something to the effect of, we never would have imagined that the human brain, the circadian clock in the human brain, is as sensitive to light as it is. And basically what they discovered is that even a moment of, a few seconds of exposure to light at the wrong time of day, at night, when you're getting, in the modern world, you're getting exposure to artificial light, that is disrupting the circadian clock in the brain. That's the signal to this circadian clock in your brain that's regulating, all these neurotransmitters and hormones that control your sleep and wake cycles and much, much more. It's giving this signal to your brain. It's daytime, the time to be awake, alert, active, and energetic. And so, in the history of humanity, for 99.99999% of the history of our species, this was a non-issue. We didn't have to worry about it at all because the only real sources of light were sunlight and firelight and the stars and the moon. And all of those, basically our biology is perfectly designed to function optimally in that environment with those light sources. The spectrum of those light sources and the timing of those light sources allows our neurotransmitters and our hormones to function as they're designed to function. The problem was humans threw a big monkey wrench in the whole thing when we created artificial light and we created electronics. Now, this problem used to not be as bad when we had just incandescent lights, because the spectrum of incandescence is very similar to firelight and to candlelight, which are pretty aligned with our biology. Then we threw a further monkey wrench into it when we created fluorescence and LEDs, and then replaced all the what we thought were the old primitive style of lighting that was not very energy efficient. We replaced all the incandescence with fluorescence and LEDs because they're more energy efficient. Which is true. You save on your electric bill every month, but you will pay for it later on in your health bill and your medical bills.
Ari, real quick on that, on LEDs, because when I was getting LEDs for my house, I was basically trying to get the warmest LEDs that are out there. Can you tell us a little bit about that for a second? Because there's a lot of us going, okay, we got rid of the incandescents, but now we've got LEDs. What kind of LEDs do we want, and what's the best that's out there?
Yeah, so the best in terms of LEDs, the best situation for indoor lighting would be to get the specific kind that you can change the spectrum of light that they're emitting throughout the day. And there's some systems out there that you can even program it so that just according to the time of day, it changes the spectrum on its own and shifts more towards the red part of the spectrum in the evening. And to be clear, that's how humans are designed, right? The sun goes up, there's lots of blue light, there's a blue sky in the day. And literally when you're seeing a blue sky, that's blue light entering your eyes. So people can make that connection. And then after the sun goes down, there's basically no more blue light around anymore.
Got it.
So that's how our biology is designed. It's designed to have exposure to blue light, which is the primary signaler for that circadian clock, the daytime energy mode signal, awake, alert, active, energetic. And then we're designed to have the absence of blue light after the sun goes down. So the issue now is that we don't have that anymore. We have all of this indoor lighting. We have computers, cell phones, tablets, street lights, car lights, all of these different sources of man-made artificial lighting that are emitting lots of blue light well after. And when we're using those things after the sun goes down, those are creating that same signal. That light's feeding back into our eyes, into our brain. It's daytime, the time to be awake, alert, active, energetic. What that's doing is phase shifting your circadian clock. It's phase shifting it into a different time zone than the one that you should be in. So it's literally phase shifting you, in many cases, 2, 3, 4 hours later than your biology is actually designed to function in that time zone. Now, what effect does that create? Well, just think about when you travel to a new time zone and your circadian clock is not properly aligned with the time zone. You get jet lag, right? What key symptoms of jet lag? Mood is disrupted, energy levels are disrupted. You're not sleeping as well. You're not as energetic as you are. You have all of these problems as a result of jet lag. Jet lag doesn't feel very good. Well, what I'm saying is most people living in the modern world are in a chronic subtle jet lag as a result of artificial light exposure at night. Now, what I'm saying, if for anybody listening that hasn't looked at the research, what I'm saying might seem like a big statement. The truth is, and I'll add one more layer, which is that especially since most people have totally normalized to this reality of the modern Western world, where we're all looking at our phones and our TV and our computers and have fluorescent, LED lights in our house, well into the night, it's totally normalized to do all of those things. So people don't think there's anything that could possibly be wrong with it since everybody does it. Well, the truth is that there's now thousands of studies, literally thousands of studies, showing that artificial light exposure at night is absolutely linked with higher rates of all kinds of different diseases, higher rates of depression, anxiety, fatigue, many, many, many other problems. This is not controversial. This is extremely well established in the scientific literature. So this is absolutely a known effect. Now, one other layer I want to add to this is there was a really fascinating study done with night owls. So, this is a field called chronotypes, which some people are more morning people and some people are more night people.
I'm definitely more of a night person. How about you, Ari? Are you a morning person or night person?
Well, here's the thing. Everybody now in the modern world thinks they're a night person. Most people do. And the issue is this. So, I'll tell you about the study first. So the study basically just took a bunch of night owls and they sent them on a camping trip, essentially. So they just said, go out into the wilderness, no artificial lights, no phones, nothing. You're in the wilderness, the sun, the moon, the stars, and firelight. And they just observed what happened. Well, all these people who are normally going to bed at 12, 12:30, 1:30 in the morning and waking up at 9:30 and 10 in the morning, all of a sudden, within the span of a few days, shifted to going to bed at right about 10 p.m. and waking up at 6 a.m. They still slept the same amount of hours, but they shifted their clock about 2 or 2.5 hours earlier, within literally like a week of just going out into nature and not having artificial light. So my point is, just living and existing in the modern world with all of these artificial lights that we all are exposed to shifts everyone, even from the time earlier than you're a teenager. It's shifting you into more of a night owl rhythm than you should be. And we're all paying some degree of a price for that. I'm not saying everybody is morning people. There's still a spectrum of people are more morning people or more night people. But what I am saying is that for most people, they're probably shifted at least an hour, but maybe 2 or 3 hours later in terms of their circadian clock than they should be.
I think I'm shifted 8 hours because I usually go to bed at five in the morning, like last night.
Oh,
Um, let me just show everybody something, and I want everybody to see this. By the way, if you're joining us right now, I'm David Avocado Wolfe. Over there is Ari Whitten, and he's joining us. Where are you calling from, Ari? Where are you?
San Diego.
San Diego, California, my old stomping grounds. What area of San Diego?
Solana Beach.
Solana Beach. Oh man, great area right there.
Yeah.
I grew up in Mission Valley, so
Nice.
and
Cool.
and lived for a while there on Del Mar Heights Road, so I know the area very well. Neat area. Anyway, I wanted to just show everybody this.
Now, by the way,
What's that?
where do you live now?
I live in Ontario, Canada, and in Hawaii,
Oh, nice.
and I go back and forth. So currently, I'm in between. I'm in California at the moment.
Nice.
So I'm right in between. And California is a great in between spot. And by the way, California right now with all this rain, this place is epic when you just add water. All right, now let me just show everybody. Okay, this is my iPhone. Oh, let me just show you my little. Let me just get this a little easier to deal with it like this. Okay, so you can swipe up on your iPhone. It's part of your operating system. You swipe. I want to get your take on this too, Ari. So boom, I swiped up. You see that display that comes up? You can see there's one right there. It's a light. Now this one right here, I can turn the light lower. Right? See that? I turned it down. Now it's giving me an option of turning on. Let me just turn it brighter so you guys can see it. It's giving me an option of turning on night shift, which is on my phone is on, which removes blue light at night from your phone. I just want everybody to know that, because if you're not aware of that tool on your phone, it's very helpful. So you're not getting blasted, because a lot of people, as you know, Ari, are using their phone at night in their bed and they're getting blasted by blue light.
Yeah.
How effective are these little systems there that remove that blue light from our phone, and does that actually help us?
Yeah, great question. So that works on iPhones, what you're talking about. My understanding of that feature on iPhones is that it reduces blue light but doesn't eliminate it. So it's still present to some extent. But if you can turn down the brightness of your phone at night and switch it to night shift mode, certainly a good thing to do. That's helpful. It doesn't completely eliminate the problem, but it's definitely helpful. On Android, on Android phones, there's also apps that you can download for free, like Twilight app that will get rid of the blue spectrum, and you can customize it so it turns your phone really, really red and very dim, and I think completely eliminates the blue. And on your computer, you can download an app called Flux. Everybody should download that, f.lux. And even during the day, you should try to limit some of the blue light from your artificial lighting sources. But certainly at night, you need to shift your computers and your iPads and all that stuff to a much lower blue light setting. And what else? So,
okay, well, let me just hold you up right there. Okay, so for everybody who's joining us right now, I'm David Avocado Wolfe. Thanks for joining us. Ari is going to be launching his training today. So if you look in the comments, you'll see we've got a link there to join his free training where he's teaching us about new ways, interesting ways, fascinating ways to increase our energy. And I want to keep going on that conversation with you, Ari. But also, by the way, tomorrow, just by coincidence, is the beginning of our 2-week cleanse. If you want information on that, we'll put that in the comments below. A lot of our people are doing both. So they're doing the cleanse and then using that extra time, because we're not going to be eating as much. We're going to be using that extra time to tune into other sources of energy, which Ari is going to be training us about, one of them being light, being the topic of conversation with us right now. So again, 2 things happening at the same time. Ari's training the energy blueprint, learn how to have more energy, and all the tools that we have access to. And it's an incredible array. And on top of that, it's spring cleaning time, and you got to clean house this time of the year. And we're doing a 2-week cleanse, all of us together. We've got hundreds of people joining us on this cleanse, and it's great to do it with other people. We'll put the link below. You can join us for the cleanse and jump in there with us for 2 weeks. And then you can go steadily, step by step back to your old ways, hopefully with some permanent changes. Okay, so anyway, let's get back to you, Ari. Look, now we've talked about blue light. We've talked about red light. Let's get into some of the other aspects of light that are important. In your research, what have you found out that we should all know?
Yeah, so, well, a couple things, to go deeper on circadian rhythm for a minute. That sun exposure that we're getting that's affecting our circadian clock is affecting our quality of our sleep, and it's affecting our energy the next day in a big way. There's even a recent study where I saw that they looked at, it was kind of a funny study. They showed they looked at professional basketball players who were tweeting late at night, on their phones, in bed, sending out on Twitter. And they looked at their relationship of that to their performance in their games. And they were they were able to detect a significant decrease in their performance just from a few nights, or one night, I think, even of late night tweeting. So again, people don't realize that these effects are going on, and we're normalized to doing all these things. And we don't even realize that our mood, our energy levels are being disrupted, our sleep quality is being disrupted the next day. One more layer to this story that I'll mention is light at night suppresses melatonin. So melatonin is, most people know it as a sleep-inducing hormone, and it is that, but it has some other really, really important roles. Melatonin is it's basically the most powerful antioxidant for your mitochondria. And it actually has the ability, unlike most dietary antioxidants, it has the ability to cross the mitochondrial membrane and actually go inside of your mitochondria and protect your mitochondria. And it also boosts the internal supplies of glutathione and all these other internal antioxidants, superoxide dismutase. And basically what it does, the end effect, is that it keeps your mitochondria strong and healthy and protects them from damage. Now, again, mitochondria are our energy generators. These are the energy generators that power the trillions of cells that are you as an organism. And so what happens if you now have sources of light that are suppressing your brain's production of melatonin by, let's say, 50% every night, year after year, or decade after decade for 10, 20, 30, 40 years? Well, basically, you're suppressing the ability of melatonin to protect your mitochondria from damage. So what happens as a result of that? The mitochondria become weak, fragile, more susceptible to damage, and they do become damaged and dysfunctional as a direct result of people having too much artificial light, poor circadian rhythm habits. So I just want to sort of connect the dots there as well. In addition, circadian rhythm is also affecting neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and several others called orexin, GABA, and a couple others we could mention. But serotonin obviously plays a big role in mood. Dopamine plays a big role in mood and motivation, and drive and pleasure. Orexin is a neurotransmitter that's a key wakefulness and energy neurotransmitter. And GABA is a neurotransmitter that's involved in relaxation and de-stressing and helping to transition our body into sleep mode. So for example, if somebody has anxiety a lot and has a hard time shutting their brain off at night and getting to sleep, or trouble sleeping deeply, that's often a sign of, disrupted GABA levels and deficient GABA levels as a result of disrupted circadian rhythm, which is a function of largely your light exposure habits. So again, I just want to point out there's lots of layers to this story of how light is affecting us. And hopefully people can start to see that taking a vitamin D pill is not replacing all of these layers of the story of the benefits of light exposure.
Yeah, we're getting a bigger story here. You're really cluing us in. Let's talk about this connection. Whenever I think about sunlight and moonlight and starlight, one of the things that I always like to do is be barefoot outside under those light sources. Even at night, being out there under the stars barefoot, there seems to be some connection there. It just feels good anyway. Years later, I found out there was a large body of research on earthing and grounding and the free electricity of the earth. And give us a little bit of that insight on the importance of basically connecting that circuit up, the heavens and the earth with us in between. And does a rubber-soled shoe or plastic-soled shoe block it?
I've definitely seen a few studies on this topic. From what I've seen, it's not a big body of evidence, and some of the studies are not really well designed. The studies that do exist show benefits, but I'm sort of still waiting for really well designed, really conclusive studies to be done to show that there is an effect there. And, there's also still some debate about the mechanisms of what is actually taking place, and some ideas around, as you know, like picking up electrons from the earth and how those electrons are affecting our body. But I've also seen scientists kind of debating that idea and saying that can't be what's going on. So this is one topic where I haven't formed a really strong opinion on as far as speaking about the scientific evidence. What I do think is, I personally walk barefoot at the beach almost every day, and I think it feels good and is a good idea, and is almost certainly not harmful in any way, and maybe is beneficial. And most people are kind of speculating around the mechanisms of how it might be beneficial right now. But if there's no possible for negative outcomes and there is a possibility of positive outcomes, I'm in. And if it also feels good and I like doing it, then I'm in.
Awesome. I'm thinking of one time, Ari, I was in Calgary, and I had a poncho on. Where's that poncho? It's over there right now. But this poncho got really high in Calgary in the wintertime. They have these Chinook winds that come in. They're kind of like the Santa Anas of Southern California. And it's a hot, dry wind that comes right through the middle of the winter. And you're like, what is going on? Everything melts and this hot wind comes in, and it has a high amount of static electricity. And I had one of these earthing mats that I got. Actually, I'll show it to you. This one right here. So I travel with this, and then I check the plug to make sure the plug's actually grounded. This, there's the little thing you can stick in the ground, but you got to make sure it's actually properly grounded. And what was interesting is this static electricity all over my poncho. I just threw it on the mat. It was like shocking, and I can get really bad and start sparking on you. I threw it on that mat, and it dissipated that static electricity field so darn fast. It was like a science project I never knew existed. I was like, whoa, that was really amazing. So that was one of the things that kind of got me going, because I've heard from researchers, scientists, doctors that static electricity is terrible. And it's one of the things that cause our immune system to become paralyzed as we move into November, for example, when we start getting that cold, dry coming in and high static electricity. You touch something, it shocks, and this is bad for our immune system. And I just saw that happen to me, and I was like, wow, that was interesting. So that was one of the things that I just stumbled across over the years that I thought I'd share with you.
Yeah. I mean, I think we need more science on this topic, and I'm interested to see how it unfolds in the next few years, and the more conclusive, really well-designed studies, kind of how things shake out. In the meantime, I'm happy to continue walking barefoot at the beach.
Nice. Yeah, me too. Okay, so let's keep going. I mean, you've got so much material you're going to be covering in your training too. And just for everyone who's joining us right now, I'm David Avocado Wolfe. Over there is Ari Whitten joining us from San Diego, California. We're both in California at the moment, and his training starts today. It's a free training, goes for 11 days. We put the link in the comments. So just below there in the comments, search through there, and you'll be able to find that link and jump on and join us. As well, we're going to be doing a detox, which begins tomorrow for 2 weeks, and you can do them both at the same time. You've got so many areas that I think you're going to be getting into. One of the things we mentioned we were going to talk about is stimulants and the effect on energy, because your expertise is, and what you're really focusing on is getting people out of fatigue and getting them back energized. What is the long-term effect of stimulants like caffeine on our bodies, and what do you think the effect is on these super stimulating energy drinks?
Yeah, great question. So one of the big problems in the modern world, especially I would say us Americans, is that we love instant gratification, and we love magic pills.
That's for sure.
And my promise, to be clear, my promise to people is not, hey, take this pill and you'll get instant energy and it will fix your fatigue issues. I would love if I had a pill that really worked to do that, but I don't, and there's nothing that exists that does that really does it. We're going to talk about stimulants in a second, but my promise is I'm going to show you how to build a high energy body. I'm going to show you how to build real energy and vitality at the cellular level, so that you stop relying on the nonsense of quick fixes like stimulant-based and sugar-based energy drinks, and relying on even coffee and other caffeine-containing beverages to drag yourself through the day. So what's the problem with coffee? And this is a really cool topic to dig into the science, because There's some stuff a lot of people don't know, but it's also a really deceptive and somewhat counterintuitive one, because people take their coffee, they take their caffeine, they take their energy drinks or their energy pills or whatever it is, and they feel a boost from it. You know, people wake up and they feel groggy and they feel low energy and fatigued and their brain's not functioning. And then they take their coffee or they take their whatever it is, their stimulant pill, and they feel the boost from it. So it's, for them, in terms of their subjective experience, it is clearly working to fix their issue. So they're immediately skeptical of me now saying, hey, that's probably not a good thing. Well, here's what's going on. So basically, the way that we'll talk about caffeine specifically, but the same basic principle applies to all the other stimulants. So the way caffeine works is that it blocks a receptor for a neurotransmitter in the brain called adenosine. Adenosine is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So it's a neurotransmitter that makes you more fatigued, more sleepy, lower energy. So what caffeine does is it goes in and it fits in the same receptor that adenosine would go in, but instead of triggering that cascade of sleepiness and low energy, it just blocks the receptor. It plugs up the receptor and prevents adenosine from getting in. So in other words, by blocking a substance that would normally make you more tired and sleepy and lower energy, it creates a stimulant energizing effect. Okay. Now, in the short term, this can be a really great thing. So let's say you take a person who doesn't normally consume caffeine, you give them some caffeine, you measure their exercise performance, you measure their energy levels, you measure their cognitive performance. You'll see benefits in all of those things for a few hours. Okay, so in that context, it can actually be a great thing. Now, the problem is when you use it every day, what happens is the brain senses it's out of balance. So the brain has a mixture of stimulatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters and is constantly trying to keep some balance of the right amount of stimulation and the right amount of inhibition. So when you add a substance into the mix, into your brain, that blocks one of these inhibitory neurotransmitters, and you do that over time, every day for long periods of time, the brain goes, I'm being way overstimulated here. I need to do something about this. So what it does is it makes more adenosine receptors. Now, this does a couple of things. One is that it makes it so you build up more of a tolerance to caffeine. What that means, you need more coffee, more caffeine to create the same energizing effect that you used to get from smaller amounts. But more importantly than that, what it's doing is it's increasing overall adenosine signaling. It's increasing the overall amount of adenosine and amount of adenosine receptors in the brain all the time. So what that's doing is it's making your brain more inhibited. It's lowering your baseline levels of energy and your mood and your performance. So in other words, picture it like this. So normal person, mood, energy, performance over the course of the day is like this. What happens if you take that person, you give them a little caffeine, they get a nice boost for a little while, and then they come back down to normal. What happens if you take someone who uses caffeine or coffee every day is this, and make sure everybody's watching so you see this. Instead of your mood, energy, and performance being here, it goes like this. And then your new baseline of energy levels are down here. And now when you take your coffee or your caffeine, it boosts you back up. So you do genuinely feel a subjective boost. The thing is, people think that they are getting a boost above what is, like above their normal level of function. What the truth is that they've lowered their baseline levels of energy, and now they're getting a boost back up to what used to be their normal level of energy.
Got it.
In other words,
let me ask you about this on that, because you mentioned caffeine. There are other xanthine alkaloids like theobromine.
Yeah.
And theobromine appears to be more of like a cardiovascular stimulant, less of a nervous system stimulant. Same thing going on there? What's happening there? Or maybe it's a different neurotransmitter. It's not adenosine, it's something else, or do you know?
I think theobromine also acts on the adenosine system, if I remember the research correctly. In small amounts, not an issue. Like, for example, in the context of cacao, I have no issue with it whatsoever. I consume plenty of cacao myself.
Hang on, I'm gonna come back on. Okay, you got me.
Okay, so but the general, so in small amounts, not an issue. I'll also say that with coffee, there's also and this needs to be balanced with everything I just said. There's also a body of literature showing various kinds of health benefits associated with coffee consumption. So decreases in heart disease, various types of cancer, diabetes, et cetera, neurological diseases. That research exists. There's health benefits associated with it. But at the same time, if you consume it on a daily basis, you also get negative effects in terms of your energy levels and your mood and your baseline levels of brain function. So both of those things exist simultaneously. The same basic principle, even though the physiological mechanisms may not be the same as caffeine, the same basic principle applies to basically all forms of stimulants. All forms of stimulants, when used, when you rely on them for your energy levels, the brain will sense in some way that it's being overstimulated and will make adaptations that lower baseline levels of energy and mood and brain performance. So in general, stimulants are not a real solution. You can use them if you have, let's say, a really intense day, you're in school or something like that, and you need to pull an all-nighter, and you do it once in a while, or you have a really intense workload and you need to work for a really, really intense period and be focused. Fine, no problem. You have a really intense workout and you want to get a little extra boost. Fine, no problem. The problem is when people rely on this stuff daily for long periods of time, that's when you really get these negative neurotransmitter adaptations.
Okay, so I assume that a lot of times when people get into total burnout, they've been basically hitting the stimulants hardcore. They've been hitting the blue light every night, and their circadian rhythms are out. There's definitely an overstimulation happening. But what other problems are happening? What are their causes? What else is going on with somebody who's burnt out?
Yeah, well, certainly psychological stress plays into it. Toxin exposure plays into it. Nutrition plays into it. Nutrition is obviously a big factor. Gut health plays into it. What are the other big ones? Hormesis is probably the other big one. As far as layering in different kinds of hormesis into your life, which are these metabolic stressors that are directly acting on the mitochondria level to build the mitochondria bigger and stronger and keep them healthy, and actually have the capacity to stimulate what's called mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of new mitochondria from scratch. So people don't realize that, David, have you ever broken a bone?
I broke my foot in the summer of 2017, and that was a brutal injury. But I got through it without pins, needles, plates, or surgery, with acupuncture and a really good OMD who guided me through the process. But it was rough.
Okay. Well, with a foot, you might not see what I'm about to say, but I was very active growing up. I broke a lot of bones, had a lot of casts. So one of the things that you experience when you wear a cast for a long period of time, if the cast is covering up a muscular area, and that's why I said that the foot doesn't work so well, because you don't have big muscles in the foot. But if your cast is covering up a muscular area like your arm or your leg or something like that, 4 weeks or 6 weeks of wearing a cast, and then you get the cast off and you look at your two legs, one of which had the cast on it and one of which didn't. And the one that had the cast on it is half the size of the other, and it's literally because those muscles atrophied. So what people don't realize is that the same thing happens with your mitochondria in your cells when they're not being stimulated. Just as a muscle shrinks when it's not being stimulated and challenged, mitochondria shrink and shrivel up and literally die off. You lose mitochondria in your cells if you're not regularly exposing them to hormetic stressors. Things like exercise, different types of exercise, fasting, those phytochemical xenohormetins, sauna exposure, cold exposure, so heat and cold, and the red and near infrared light exposure, all these different layers of hormetic stressors. These are the things that keep our mitochondria stimulated, that keep them big, strong, healthy, and robust, and capable of producing lots of energy. And they also build up that internal antioxidant defense system that protects the mitochondria from damage from stressors. So, that's, if there's any secret in the health field, that still exists somehow with all this research being out there. And it's not a secret in the health community. There's a lot of longevity researchers that already are convinced that hormesis is the key to longevity and disease prevention. But if there's any secret, something that's there's a huge amount of research on, it genuinely works and it is extremely powerful, and very few people in the general public know about it, hormesis is that secret.
That's good stuff, man. This is great. Okay, well, we kept you here for an hour. Just for everybody who's been with us for the whole hour, thanks for joining us. I'm David Avocado Wolfe. I'm joined by Ari Whitten. His energy blueprint is online as of today, his training. So you can join the training. Click the link below. We put it in the comments. We also have our detox kicking off tomorrow. Why not do both and just go for it? Get your energy up and use other forms of energy than food and stimulants, and really check into the magic and mystery of light therapies, the magic and mystery of fasting, because we're going to work our way over 2 weeks into a pretty good fast. And that's the plan. And we'll provide you with the detox guides and all kinds of goodies once you join our cleanse. It's going to begin tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. And Ari's training has already begun. So again, click the link below for both of those. One thing I wanted to ask you, Ari, because that's just of interest. You brought up this whole thing of cold water. And I was just at Harbin Hot Springs. You probably know Harbin Hot Springs in Northern California.
I've never been there, but I've heard of it.
It burned down like 4 years ago. Unbelievably insane fire that went through there, burned everything down, and they just reopened. So I went over there, and the whole entire forest is all charcoal. So wow. Charcoal cleans the environment. It sucks up. It's adsorptive. It sucks all toxins to itself. So it was just a brilliant experience being in that. And then they have all the spring water bubbling out. A lot of it's cold. So I thought, let me just skip the hot springs, because there are a lot of people in there. It was like a sardine can. Yeah. And I just went and did the cold dips. And it was one of the most wonderful things I've experienced in a long time, just cold dip after cold dip. Give us a little bit on the power of cold, some of the Wim Hof stuff and some of your experience with that, because that's an area that I just absolutely love. That's my favorite stimulant going, is just jumping into ice cold water.
Yeah, it's a good one. And the reason it's a good one is because it's a hormetic stressor. It doesn't just create a sort of immediate stimulant effect, which it does do that, but it also creates long-term benefits. So unlike stimulants that create an immediate effect while compromising your long-term energy, this is something that is also working to help build real energy at the cellular level, because it's stimulating those mitochondria through hormesis. It's one of those transient metabolic stressors that are creating that effect. Now there's a variety of different mechanisms that are involved here. One interesting kind of weird fact is there's one of the key signaling proteins involved in a lot of hormetic stressors, like exercise and sauna exposure, is something called heat shock proteins, which are, they were discovered around being shocked from heat, from hyperthermia, from a sauna, for example. And so this has been identified. There's lots of research around these heat shock proteins being key signaling molecules. What's interesting is that they've discovered that cold exposure also stimulates heat shock proteins, which obviously you wouldn't think, because it's cold. It shouldn't be stimulating these heat shock proteins, but it does. And so, there's a variety of effects there. There's also effects in terms of cold exposure on various hormones, creating a sort of surge of adrenaline that creates some of that immediate boost in energy and sort of alertness. One of the other layers of mechanisms is brown fat or brown adipose tissue, which is something that you're stimulating. It's a little bit of fat tissue that is kind of on the usually on the back of our bodies, kind of around the rib cage, and it acts as kind of an internal heater. And it's not like regular body fat. It's something that kind of burns up energy to create heat, with the purpose of keeping us warm in cold environments. Now, interesting little fun fact, but researchers for many, many decades actually thought that in adult humans, there is no brown fat. We don't have it at all. It's something that they thought was only in babies. They knew that human babies had brown adipose tissue or brown fat. And it was thought, oh, this just kind of goes away as people get older, and it's normal for adults not to have any brown fat. Well, we actually know that that's not true. what is abnormal is for us not to have any brown fat, as most people do. And what's really going on is that living in a modern environment, which is like an anti-hormetic environment where we're no longer exposed to the elements, we no longer have demands on us to do physical activity. We no longer have to deal with food shortages or fasting sometimes. We no longer have diets rich in phytochemicals. We're no longer exposed to sunlight so much. We're living in indoor climate controlled environments where we're, in this narrow band of temperature from 67 degrees to 72 degrees, always wanting to make sure we never get too hot or too cold. We always stay just right, perfectly comfortable. Well, that environment, the absence of these hormetic stressors in the modern lifestyle has basically fragilized our body. It's caused our mitochondria to atrophy and made us weak and not resilient to stress, which leads to higher disease resistance, fatigue, and many other things. But one of the other things it does is it leads to the atrophy of the brown fat tissue. The brown fat literally goes away. Same exact principle as I shared before. If a muscle is not stimulated, it atrophies. If you don't stimulate brown fat by going into cold environments, by being exposed to the elements, the body goes, hey, we don't need this stuff anymore. There's no need for the brown fat to be there to be burning excess energy. Let's just get rid of the brown fat. So it is something that we should have if we were living a modern lifestyle, and it's something that you can potentially regain. It's actually possible to convert some white fat, body fat, back into brown fat as a result of cold exposure training and doing the kind of thing that you're talking about.
That's great. Great to hear that. One of the things I like to do, Ari, is sleep freezing. I found that if I go to sleep when it's just absolutely freezing and don't use any covers, I can get a very deep rest very quickly and wake up recharged. And I just wanted to throw that out there because that's how into this cold stuff I am. I think the cold research and what Wim Hof is doing is absolutely awesome. But what you're doing is even more awesome because you're taking that and so many of these Hormesis stressors and bringing those to light, especially for all of us who would love to have more energy to get things done day and night. We covered a lot of material, and thanks to everybody who stayed with us. We are going to put this up on the Facebook page, so it will be replayable. I know there was a lot of sophisticated vocabulary used, and it's something that you might want to study and watch again or listen to again, maybe when you're at home or driving or something like that. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us. I'm David Avocado Wolfe. Over here is Ari Whitten joining us from San Diego. He's got his energy blueprint training beginning today. The link is below. It is free. Please be a part of that because you can learn so much from this gentleman. I'm David Avocado Wolfe, and we're doing a detox kicking off tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern, and that's when the call will kick off the whole thing for us for 2 weeks. It's going to be an incredible springtime. From Ari and I, we are wishing you guys the best day ever.